I have a definition of cyber risk that is very common, that I think is a stupid definition, which leads into an area that I know you're an expert in. And so according to the dictionary, cyber risk is based on the probability of a bad event happening to business systems, leading to the loss of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. My premise as I introduce you and allow you to share with the audience who you are and why you're amazing is that that's not really a complete definition, and we have other frameworks that take us a lot deeper and help us make better decisions. And so with that set up, I've thrown you a softball. Please share with the audience who you are, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts about why that's such a bad definition and what's a better approach for managing cyber risk for an organization.
Sure. Thank you, Keon. So, all right, Donna Gallaher, and I guess I'm an engineer by training. So that was my first role out of college. And then I transitioned into sales, and then I transitioned into IT operations management. And from IT operations management into more executive IT management, got certified in cybersecurity, and then worked in several roles where I was the liaison between the IT team and the security team, implementing best practices. One of my first roles in there was working for a company who had been under a consent decree from the Federal Trade Commission. And they were under this consent decree. You get an evidence-based audit of your entire security program every 2 years. So that was a good experience for me, and I had to build a program with no staff and no money, and to come into compliance so the FTC wouldn't shut us down. So that was a great, first entrance into a full-time security role. And from there, I took on other CISO type roles, security program manager. I was certified in European data privacy for one of my last full-time employers. And then in 2018, I started my own company doing security program governance for small and medium businesses primarily. And I also help some of the larger companies where they're struggling with a certain aspect of their security program. And I know what you're asking me about is I also am very active with FAIR quantitative risk methodology. And what that means is basically all the risks that you showed on your next slide, Keon, if you can bring it back up, of the different types of risk that you have listed. Basically, what FAIR says is all risk is financial risk. So where we have, let's say, operational risk there, and you have an outage, well, maybe that outage is you can't deliver product during that time, or you can't take orders during that time. So how much does that cost? And reputational risk might mean, well, now we have to pay more to retain employees, or we have to lower our prices because clients don't have confidence in us anymore, or we have to pay a fine or something like that because of a previous breach. That contractual regulatory risk, that might be fines and judgments, lawsuits. It might be SLAs that you have to pay out to your clients because you weren't careful enough, with the data. So what FAIR does is it normalizes cyber risk to all other, brings it to the least common denominator, which is financial. And the reason that's helpful for a couple of reasons. It's very difficult to talk about risk when you're talking about just an individual control. Just the presence or absence of a single control, you can't really do too much with that. What FAIR does is it bases risk on scenarios, because there's a number of controls that can affect any one scenario. So some of the things that we talked about, we were talking about phishing before. So if I were to talk about, well, how susceptible are you to lose, let's say, your customer records in a phishing email? It depends more on just, my password, or it depends more if I have more than just multi-factor authentication set up. It also includes how is the network segmented? How likely are my employees to click on a phishing email? Do we have any filtering service and stuff in place? So you have to ask all of those questions before you can really assess the risk of how likely am I to lose data in a phishing attack, because you have to take all of that other stuff into consideration. The other thing that it does for you is that it helps the CISO build relationships with the business, because you're actually talking about something they can understand. You're talking about a scenario. You're talking about, to a sales team, what if your customer list got out, your prospect list and your pricing for your contracts, where your competitors, if they were to get it, they could underbid you and you wouldn't sell anymore? Or what if your product that you're being developed had some type of flaw in the source code and was exploitable, and you wouldn't not only be able to sell anything anymore, harm the reputation of the company, and then maybe also have to pay out your customers for that. That would be so talking about risk in terms of scenarios and then associating those controls that affect that really helps build that collaboration with the business, rather than let's just talk about cybersecurity. Let me tell you about why you need to set up multi-factor authentication and why you need to have better passwords. There's no consequence in that type of discussion. Whereas if you can relate the security controls to the scenario that it applies to, it's much more effective in building the culture of the company.